to see so many people joining us this afternoon. This is a fantastic event, and it couldn't have happened without the support of the Law Society Wales office and also CPM 21. We have Wayne Williams here, but I'll let Jonathan Davis chair the event, but I've just got a little bit of housekeeping for everybody. So I'm just going to mute everybody for the time being. If you could stay on mute unless you're a speaker, that'd be great, and it just stops some of the background interference. We have quite a lot of, obviously we'll have a lot of questions as well to get through. You'll notice that there is a chat function. It should be at the bottom of your screens. If you've got a question for the speakers, or you would like to ask a question when it comes to the Q&A session, if you could just put a smiley face or me next, that would be fantastic. If you could just stay on mute, I'll unmute you, or I'll just ask you to unmute yourself. There should be a little button at the bottom left side of your screen. The chat function, you can either email everybody, or you can ask me directly, or you can send a message to Jonathan or Wayne, and just hover over the blue section in the chat function, and you can change the name of the participant that you want to contact. I am recording the session today, so not the Q&A, because I want that to remain anonymous. So if anybody wants to share the video afterwards, you're going to get a mailer with all the information in, sent to you after the event, and you can share that more widely, and obviously I'd encourage you to do that. Just something from me, obviously legal news is free. We're looking for news, analysis, interview suggestions and events as well to share with the legal sector and wider profession within Wales. We've had a fantastic following so far, and it's all for you. And I'm keeping a lot of things free in terms of contributions as well. So if there's somebody that you're working with that's making a real difference to your firm, please get them to contact me. We're also hosting an event with the SRA next Thursday, and I will ask you if you'd like to be added to our mailing list so you're the first to know to book onto that event. We're running that in collaboration with Cardiff and District Law Society, and this is, I believe it's one of the first online events they've had with a regional, or certainly even a law society group since the pandemic started. So we're looking at compliance issues, training contract issues, but you're all very, very welcome. Again, that's a free event, and I'd encourage you to share that widely. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Jonathan Davis, who many of you will know as a lead at the Law Society Wales office. He's going to chair the event for us. Over to you, Jonathan.
Gemma, can everybody hear me? Yes. Afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Law Society Wales office thought it was very important that as many members as possible were informed about the Economic Resilience Fund that is available from Welsh Government. We appreciate exactly how difficult it is for all of you members out there. These are very, very strange and unprecedented times, and anything that the Law Society Wales office can do to help members during this difficult time, we're here to help as much as we possibly can. We will be collating the questions, as Emma said. Anything that comes up during the course of this event today will be written up and will be passed straight on to Ken Skates and his officials tomorrow morning, so that they can put it into the system to take on board your views and the content of today. So I know we've got a video from Ken Skates to introduce the afternoon, and then we'll hand over to Wayne to take you through the presentation. But once again, I just want to say thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Okay, I'm just going to share my screen with you now.
Well, this is an incredibly difficult time for people and businesses right around the world. And as a Welsh government, we're endeavouring to do all we can to support communities, individuals, families, and of course the economy. Now, the legal sector is vitally important to the Welsh economy. And so far, we've been able to announce as a government just under £2 billion of support for businesses. Businesses of all types, across all sectors and all sizes. This is in addition to the support from UK government. And today you'll be getting a full briefing on the Economic Resilience Fund. This is a particularly important fund because it offers support in the form of grants to businesses of every size across the entire economy. There will be grants of £10,000 for micro businesses, employing 1 to 9 people, grants of £100,000 for SMEs employing between 10 and 249, and then there'll be grants available to larger employers who are of social or economic significance to the Welsh economy. Hopefully you'll be able to gain all of the insight into the Economic Resilience Fund today, ahead of applications going live later this week.
Okay, thank you. Jonathan, did you want to say anything else before we introduce, or would you like to introduce Wayne for me?
To Wayne and his expertise, for joining us this afternoon and for helping to talk everybody through it. And I hope you find the day useful.
Can I just check that you can see that presentation? Yeah.
Yeah.
Couple of thoughts. Yes. You all sit? Okay. Well, welcome to this afternoon's presentation on the COVID-19 Economic Resilience Fund. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Wayne Williams of CPM 21, and you can see our website address there. So if you want to follow up with me at a later stage, I know Emma's going to give you contact details, but if you want to come through direct, then you'll find my mobile phone details, etc. on that website. I just wanted to say at the outset, I'm sure you all, your major concern is continued health and safety during this time. And we at CPM 21 realize what a struggle it is for you guys with cash flow, etc. So sometimes it's difficult when you're on your own to deal with these situations. So I just wanted to offer help. I've said it to our associates internally as well, that it's not a time for pride. It's a time for picking up the phone and seeking help and support. I just wanted you to know that even if you haven't used us before and never use us after the event, then we're quite happy to talk to you as a sounding board. So feel free to get in touch if you want. So you'll notice that the fund is called the Economic Resilience Fund. I think it's important just to pause and understand what resilience means. So a website definition from the Oxford Dictionary says it's the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties and toughness. And it's about coming out the other side of this situation as a thriving business. And then the second definition is the ability of a substance or object to spring back into shape. Businesses that are in good shape have some profitability. Businesses that are out of shape don't have that. And I think it's important to clock that this fund is not designed to help businesses that are in financial difficulties prior to the lockdown. It's designed to help businesses that are ongoing, businesses that can demonstrate a degree of sustainability outside of the current situation. Yeah, and I'm sure most of you can probably do that. Probably many of you have been going for several years and year on year making some sort of profit. Perhaps not the profit we'd like, but I'm sure you are profitable businesses. So just to reaffirm what's already been said, there is a £400 million fund available under this Government Resilience Fund, but the first phase, there's only going to be a release of 200 million. So there is a limited pot available in this first phase. I don't think we yet have any information on when phase 2 will happen. I'm sure Jonathan will comment if he knows anything different from that, but I guess it depends on how long this goes on for. Applications will open on Friday the 17th. You'll see I put in the word at and we did ask whether we could know what time the website would open, because I've no doubt there'll be a fairly large number of visitors to it, but we haven't been able to ascertain the start date. So I'm sure if the Law Society become aware of that start time, that Richard and Jonathan will let you guys know. So the importance of the 17th, however, is to say you need to be ready on the 17th to submit your application. So don't waste the rest of the time between now and Friday. You know, you need to be getting on with some preparation. As the Minister mentioned in the video, the fund is available to all eligible Wales-based businesses, including legal practices. So effectively, you are in competition with other sectors for getting this grant funding. So as the slide says, make sure you get in early, yeah? So it's going to be sort of first come, first serve. So do your preparation, and the first stage in that preparation is to visit the Welsh Government's eligibility tool and answer the screening questions, which I'm going to talk you through in a moment. That's your first action following this. I would recommend that after this video, after you've asked your questions, that you immediately go off and visit that, that tool to go through the screening questions and become familiar with them. Okay, it's quite a user-friendly tool, very simple to use, as I hope to demonstrate, technology allowing in a second. If you are a business with 250 or more employees, I don't know the size of the businesses that are online today. Emma may know that better than I. But if you are a very large business, as the Minister indicated, there is a special route for you to access this fund, and it is through your business development manager at the Welsh Government. Yeah. If you are a business of this size, you probably already have an allocated business development manager. If you don't, then you'll see on this slide the contact details to get in touch with your business development manager, which will be allocated to you. As I said, Emma's going to circulate these slides afterwards, so you'll be able to see that information. I would guess from the general size of legal practices that I see in Wales, however, and some of you that I know the faces online today, that you will be far smaller than 250 employees, and therefore what I'm about to talk about is relevant to you guys. So the next question you have to decide is whether you have to answer is whether you are a micro business or whether you are an SME. So the important thing to note is that you need to employ at least one member of staff under pay-as-you-earn tax system. Yeah, if you are and I don't think there are too many of these around anymore, but if you are a pure sole practitioner working from home with no employed staff, then you will not be eligible for this funding. I'm glad to see that lots of screens haven't gone blank on that statement. But it is important even for you, if you are listening at the moment and you're in that situation, to check out the UK government website for help for self-employed people. There is help. I think it's a little bit further downstream in coming through, but it will be available to you as a self-employed person. Coming back to today's funding, if you have 1 to 9 employees, then you will be defined as a micro business. That's the test. So how many full-time employees do you actually have? That's one piece of information that you need to work out. Sometimes that information is not always to hand when I ask firms how many employees do you have. They have to think about it a bit and then go off to their practice manager or someone to find out. So that's one piece of homework for you, is to check how many employees you actually have. If it's 1 to 9, then you're a micro business for the purposes of this funding. If you are a micro business, then you have to demonstrate that you have suffered a 40% reduction in turnover since the 1st of March 2020. What I would suggest you do there is talk to your accountant perhaps tomorrow about your turnover, about the drop that you've seen last month. And if I put it this way, accountants are better at playing with figures than lawyers sometimes are. Yeah. And you'll notice that although this says 40% reduction in turnover since the 1st of March, it doesn't give you a period in which to compare it with. Now, whether there'll be more specific questions on the actual application form, I don't know. But at this level, they haven't defined what the comparator is. So, for example, it could be a comparison between what your turnover was for the month from the 1st of March to the 31st of March of this year, compared with the same period last year. I'm sure that'll give you a certain percentage. There may be more favorable percentages available to you. So do think about that carefully. It wouldn't be appropriate when talking to a bunch of lawyers with a law society present to talk about creative accounting, but you get the drift. Yeah, I think it's important to note what the minister said here when he gave the video introduction about the legal sector being vital to the Welsh economy. And I think don't underestimate that, even if you are a small practitioner in the heart of Wales, because you're probably creating a number of jobs in that community, and your staff are spending in that community. So don't think this is just for Cardiff firms, although Cardiff firms obviously would be equally entitled to claim that they contribute significantly to their local communities. So think carefully about how you calculate the 40% reduction in turnover. I'll talk about turnover again in a moment. And for micro businesses, if you can do that, then on the face of it, you can claim, as the minister said, up to 10K's worth of grant funding under this resilience fund. If you have 10 to 249 employees, then you are defined as an SME business. Okay, and in that case, you have to show a 60% reduction in turnover since the 1st of March. And as the minister again said, with available grants up to 100K. I thought it was just worth mentioning what turnover actually is. There's a very good website called simplybusiness.co.uk. You struggle with some of this terminology that's flying around at the moment. We're all having to get used to new language. I certainly came across last week a new piece of language for me about online proctoring of examinations to check that training solicitors don't cheat when they do the professional skills exams. So that's something we've been looking at for the first time. So I'm sure you've all got used to new language. But there's lots of business language flying around which you may not be that familiar with. This would be a good site to look at to get some terminology. So for a legal practice, when it talks about turnover as the total sales generated by a business, it's commonly called in legal practices the gross fees, the gross fee income, the fee income. So basically it's the top line, not the bottom line. So when you're looking down your accounts, it's the numbers at the top before all your expenditure comes out. And as you know, the bottom line is your profit. Again, as I say, it is probably worth talking to your accountant as to how you manage this, how you manage to demonstrate a reduction in 40% or 60% as appropriate. The process of application is, first of all, your initial preparation, which will start immediately after this this webinar, I would suggest. So first of all, you need to decide, am I a micro business, less than 9 or less employees, under pay-as-you-earn, or am I an SME? That's an important consideration for you. The next thing is, are you a registered company or are you not? I would hope that you each know your legal status as lawyers. And obviously the key difference is if you're a registered company, you'll be registered at Companies House with a company's registration number. It's quite easy to do a Companies House search to check that. You can actually get an app downloaded to your phone, which will, a Companies House app, which is very useful for doing that, where you can search company names. The second step is to go to the Business Wales tool that I mentioned earlier, the eligibility checker, and I'm going to take you through that in a second, so you can see step by step how easy it is to navigate through it. Once you've gone through that filtering process, if you think that you then qualify, then I would encourage you to submit an application. I think the message that I'm getting sort of obliquely on this is have a go. Yeah. Obviously, don't put any information in which is misleading, but nevertheless, if you think you qualify, have a go. Make an application and make your application as early as possible. I'm going to, before I go through that exercise, just to do the last slide I have in the pack, other than the Q&A. You'll see as we go through it that if you're an SME, there is a reference to bank loans, which I'll come back to as we go through it. So I've just put on this slide, which will be circulated, the 2 types of loan that are available and supported by government. The first one is run by the British Business Bank, so you can look on their website, and there's a link on that website to find it. And as of the 2nd of April, you'll see that that scheme has been expanded to allow smaller businesses to access it without necessarily having to put forward personal guarantees, which in this uncertain world, obviously, I guess, lots of you won't want to do. So it is worth having a look at that to see if you're eligible, even if you're unsuccessful or don't qualify for this scheme. And then you'll see that there's also the COVID-19 Wales Business Loan Scheme, which there was 100 million allocated by the Welsh Government to that. But sadly, as far as you guys are concerned, that scheme is already fully subscribed, which really underlines what I said earlier, the importance of applying early. So if you're going to go for this, Friday is the day to go for it. It may all be used up by Monday. So if I come back to this, I'm hoping this technology is going to work. So this will take us through to the fund checker. Are you able to see that? Yes? Okay, that's good. It's good news. I'll see if I can make it a bit bigger. Okay. So you're presented when you go to this checker with this screen. And all you need to do to get started is to click that red box there. Now, the first question on this filtering questionnaire is, are you inquiring about a business or organization that solely provides core product for the agricultural sector, i.e. crops, milk, or livestock? Now, I would assume that, I've heard of solicitors diversifying into lots of things, but even in this crisis, I wouldn't guess that I would guess that you're not yet selling milk except from your offices. So the answer to that question will be no for all of you. The next question, again, will require a common answer. So prior to the 1st of March, were you receiving payment for goods or services? So obviously you guys will have been receiving payments for services. The only people that wouldn't therefore qualify at this part, this gate as it were, through the checker, would be businesses that set up after the 1st of March. So if you're a new business startup, then you'd be in difficulty in accessing this. And I think that's generally the issue for new business startups in terms of accessing funding at the moment. So we're going to say that, yes, you did receive payment for services prior to the 1st of March. And then you come to the question that I mentioned earlier as to whether or not you are a registered company paying at least one or more employees via pay-as-you-earn. And the answer to that has to be yes. Unless you are not, sorry, let me rewind that. The answer to that is yes if you are a registered company, and no if you are not, if you are a partnership. What I found is if you go through this and answer it no, it takes you to the same place ultimately as if you answer yes, okay? So it's not a deciding question, as it were. So if we click yes, so I'm going to assume for this run through it, I'm going to try and do 2 runs through if we have time. We are a registered company, so the answer is yes. I'm going to assume for this example that you have less than nine or less employees and therefore a micro business. So we're going to answer yes. And then we have this question: is your business or organization eligible for the business rate grant? Which is, I think, one of the first obstacles to potentially restrict who gets the grant funding. If you're a micro business and you've obtained business rate grant, then it is likely, it seems to me, that you will not qualify for this funding. Okay, that's if you're a micro business. I'll deal with SMEs a little later on. So I'm going to say no for the moment. What you end up on, what you land on, is this page. I'd like to, with your permission, take you through the eligibility criteria, which have now been revealed on this page. So you'll see the first criteria is that you have not basically obtained other Welsh Government non-payable grant funding. I want to underline the words Welsh Government. So if you obtain funding via the UK government, such as furloughing staff, then that would not be via the Welsh Government. Okay? So it is likely that you haven't received other funding from the Welsh Government, non-repayable grant funding. As I mentioned earlier, if you are a micro business, and it repeats it here, then you must demonstrate in excess of a 40% reduction in turnover since the 1st of March. You have to be VAT registered. You have to be not eligible for business rate relief grant that I mentioned earlier. You have to have an operating address in Wales and have employees in Wales. And then we come to the next sort of tricky bit. A sustainable plan exists to trade beyond the COVID-19 epidemic. Okay. Now, a sustainable plan, as with any business plan, will require you to make certain assumptions upon which the plan is based. And what I would say to you here is no one really knows when this is going to end, how it's going to end, because until the government decide to lift the lockdown, then business will not get back to normal as we once knew it. So I think you just need to set out what you think are the most likely scenarios. So if I give you CPM 21 sustainability plan, it would say that we are assuming that we will not be able to do any face-to-face work with businesses until at least mid-June of 2020. Now, that may be too pessimistic, but you have to make some sort of assumption upon which to draft such a plan. So just think about that when you think you're likely to be up and running again, whether you could be up and running remotely and how much could you continue to do remotely. And it is important, I think, in terms of demonstrating to Welsh Government that you're taking this seriously, that you show that you're able to maintain social distancing in your offices if you were to start again. How are you dealing with that? How are you going to cope with that situation if you are, how are you going to deal with clients? How are you going to protect clients if they're coming into your offices? You may already be doing this, but set out your plan as to how you propose to exist and trade beyond the COVID-19 pandemic. Then you'll see applicant businesses and organizations will be expected to align with the ethos and principles of the economic contract. I'm just going to mention a couple of things from the economic contract, which again you'll find on that link when you click on it. Again, I don't think there's anything in here that should deter you from application. Although you may be put off by some of the words, I think you can get around these. So the first thing is, it means businesses seeking our support will actively collaborate with us and commit to principles that we believe in, and these are the principles that they set out. The first is the principle of growth, business growth. So you're seeking to grow as a business. Now, I don't know any legal firms that I've come across that are not seeking to grow their practices in terms of volumes of work coming in, etc., etc. Fair work, so you deal with your staff fairly, and good ethical principles. You may well have a flexible working policy tucked away in your manual, which will demonstrate that. The next one is health. And again, if you are Lexel accredited, you are likely to have a health and safety policy to demonstrate that you are compliant with that. The next one is skills and learning. Most of you, again, that are Lexel accredited will have a learning and development plan or a learning and development policy, which you could demonstrate that with. And the last element of this paragraph is decarbonisation. And again, for Lexel, some firms will have a corporate social responsibility policy in place to show what you are doing in regards to recycling and the environment. So those are useful reference points for you in relation to those requirements. And the next paragraph talks about how a company contributes to the wealth and well-being of its workers and the wider community. Again, I think the corporate social responsibility policy comes into play there. And if you don't have one documented, it's worth documenting what you actually do in the community. So for example, you may be offering pro bono advice within your local communities. You may be doing charitable work. I know there's lots of businesses I go to these days that are actively out doing charitable work in the communities that they serve. So anything like that, think about what you do and just document a page or so on what you're actually doing. So if you are audited on this post the event, you have something to show. And the other element is what the final element on this, which I'll mention online today, is the 5 calls to action by Business Wales. And the 5 calls to action may deter you, so I'm just going to go through and say you shouldn't be deterred by these. The first one is R&D, automation and digitalization. R&D, of course, being research and development. So businesses adapt and thrive in an economy shaped by innovation and high-tech industries and remain competitive in a constantly changing and global economic environment. Well, if anybody's under pressure to be competitive, it's the legal sector. I know that you've done lots of innovation with IT implementation, case management systems, all that good stuff you just need to now use as part of your demonstration that you are complying with these 5 calls. So the second one is high quality employment, skills and development, and fair work, which I mentioned earlier. This is the one that may cause you to stumble. I don't think it should. Exports and trade is number 3. Okay, now some of you will say, well, there's no way that I'm ever going to be exporting my services outside of the UK. I think it's important that you think about the UK there as England and Wales. So if you act for clients in England, so your geographical stretch is outside of Wales, then that would be a good thing to tick that particular box. But I wouldn't be too pedantic about being in export and trade when you're looking at this and say, oh, there's no point in me applying because I don't do that, okay? Innovation, entrepreneurship, and headquarters. So again, business continually develop products and services that enable them to remain competitive. I talked about that already. And the last one is decarbonisation that I've also mentioned already. So that's all that's behind that hyperlink for economic contract. But say at first glance, it may put you off, say there's no point in me applying because I don't do that stuff. Whatever you do, I would say don't let that line stop you. Go ahead with your application. Because I think most of you will, even if unconsciously, be doing all that stuff. It's just, again, the new language, the new jargon of this world that we are now inhabiting. So then we have 2 other clauses here. In submitting an application for the Resilience Fund, I'm content for my application details to be shared following GDR approval with delivery partners of the scheme. So it's local authorities in Business Wales. It seems to me that GDPR has almost taken a back seat these days. I mean, we see, for example, that supermarkets are now getting lists of shielded individuals. My daughter's a shielded individual, and her details have been sent to Tesco's without her knowledge or consent, whereas prior to this lockdown, that would have been a major breach of GDPR. So I don't think that's going to be a problem for you. And likewise, I don't think the last bullet point should be a problem for you when you say I'm happy for the name of my business to be published on a list of recipients of support from Welsh Government website. So after the event, if you are successful, your firm's name will be shown as receiving support from the Welsh Government. So in these days that we inhabit, I don't think that will be a particular problem for anyone. Certainly shouldn't be, I would say. It makes good business sense to apply for grant support in the current downturn. Then you'll see at the bottom of the page, there's a list of information that you need to have ready and available when you start to fill in the application form. So your VAT number, your company registration number, the sector, which presumably will be the legal sector, number of full-time employees, your annual turnover, your bank details to get the cash sent to you if you're successful, and which other Welsh COVID-19 support funds have you applied for or been accepted for. So those are the requirements if you are a micro business following that particular pathway. I'm just looking at the time. Gemma, is it okay if I whiz through once more? Is that okay? So if you bear with me, we'll go back to start again. And it's as easy as that. So if you get it wrong, you think you've got it wrong, it's easy to go back to the beginning. So we'll get started. Again, we're still not selling milk and livestock from our offices, so that's always going to be a no. That one is got to be a yes. And this time, instead of saying that we're a registered company, I'm going to answer no. I'm going to say no to being a charity, although those of you who do legal aid may think that you are from time to time. Then we're going to have the question, do you have pay-as-you-earn employees? To which we must answer yes. And this time I'm going to say no. Do you have 9 or less employees? I'm going to answer that no. And I'm going to say yes to this one as to whether I have less than 250. And it'll bring you to this page, which has a striking similarity, as you can see, to the one that we came to with regard to micro businesses. So I'm going to just point out some of the differences here between micro and SMEs. So the first 2 bullet points are wrongly aligned by the Welsh Government. So they're not actually 2 bullet points, they're all 1 sentence, okay? So again, asking you the question whether you've had other Welsh Government funding. That's what those lines are doing. The difference here for an SME, as we saw earlier, that you have to show a reduction of 60% in turnover. You have to show, again, that you are not eligible for business rate relief grants, but there is a caveat this time, or if it is, the amount will be deducted from the allocation from this fund. So if you are in the SME category and you've had the business rate relief, you're not barred from applying for this. Simply, they will deduct that amount of money back from you at the end when they allocate you the grant funding. Operating address in Wales and has employees in Wales is the same as before. A sustainable business plan, as we saw, exactly as we saw with micro business. The next big hurdle that bothered me is this one here. The inability to access funding needed from a bank, including the British Business Bank, is demonstrated. And I raised a question via the Law Society with the Welsh Government as to what inability meant. Because my thoughts were that if we were unable to access bank funding because, for example, we didn't feel that our current profitability would be attractive to them in giving us the loans that we wanted, then that would be sufficient to say that, or something of that nature. Anyway, they've come back this morning, and you may want to make a note of this because this is going to change by Friday. So this question, as a result of me asking the question, this criteria has changed. I almost wish, as I said to Jonathan earlier, I almost wished I hadn't asked the question in the beginning because there was more wriggle room in this existing one. So the new question, new criteria will be, you will be required to demonstrate that you've either already accessed funding from your bank, so you've already had a loan from your bank, including the British Business Bank offer that I mentioned earlier, or set out why you have not been able to. That's the bit I'm not entirely sure what that means, because the only example they give is, for example, a deferred application. So it all depends on what they mean by set out why you have not been able to. I would have thought that that would be sort of based on the fact that you didn't think you'd be economically attractive to the bank to give you the money you were looking for, given the uncertainties surrounding the business. But we'll have to see what the actual question says on the day in terms of answering that. So that has changed. This form will therefore change, I'm told, later today. I'm looking at this is live on the website at the moment, so they haven't changed it yet, but they will change it later in the day. So by the time you see this on Friday, don't be surprised that that question changes. The other additional requirement for SMEs as opposed to micro businesses, you have to confirm that there are no future compulsory redundancies will be made as long as the coronavirus job retention scheme is in place. So you may have staff on furlough at the moment. For as long as that is going on, then you can't make compulsory redundancies within your practice. You'll note the word compulsory. So there is a little bit of wriggle room around that if there were opportunities for voluntary redundancies at some point. Applicant businesses and organizations, again, align with the principles exactly as for micro businesses. And the last two, again, are exactly as you saw on the previous slides. So hopefully I've demonstrated from that it's relatively easy to navigate through this checker, this eligibility checker. And hopefully that gives you some food for thought as to how you'll answer the questions when they emerge on the actual application form. I think that's all I want to say at this stage. So I think I'll hand back to Jonathan, is it, who's going to share the question?